Today, I'm joined by Georgia, the founder of the Anxiety Healing Club, a space designed for women to better understand their anxiety whilst also building real connection and community. After struggling with anxiety from a young age, Georgia went on a journey to understand the nervous system, her own flight or flight, and eventually turned that healing into something that could help others too. What started as yoga classes with anxiety support has now evolved into so much more, a space where women can connect, learn, laugh, cry, and feel less alone. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
How are you?
Yes, I'm good, thank you. Are you?
Yeah, good.
Good.
So, shall we start from the beginning? How did anxiety start showing up in your life, and how did that feel for you?
So I think anxiety was just so prominent in my whole childhood. When I think back to being young, it's just there constantly. I never really felt just naturally calm and confident. You know, when you see those people who just don't get anxious and you're like, what's wrong with you? And I had a childhood that was full of like conflict and confrontation, a lot of like abandonment issues, rejection issues, not feeling enough or wanted or fully loved. And my house at the time, it didn't fully feel safe. And most times, like in the house, I would feel like very on edge, very shaky, your typical like physical anxiety symptoms. And then it would kind of bleed into everything else where like when you're in school and like the teacher picks on you and you're like, I'm terrified of getting the answer wrong because it's going to be embarrassing, and or like if you have to give like a presentation or anything like that, it would be really, really hard. And I think that kind of then kept going and kept going and kept going. And when I got to university, it was just horrendous as well. And I didn't think I really realised the extent of it until I was about 16. And I think a lot of that was because I had a boyfriend at the time. And I remember just going around to his house and his parents were normal. And I was like, did they not argue all the time? Like, and he was like, no. And I don't know if because I then just started to compare, I then just hit a wall, and that anxiety then turned into, I think, all those feelings of not being good enough, not being happy, that all just came to the front. And I started procrastinating a lot, and developing habits like binge eating and binge watching, avoiding everything. And looking back, even though at that time I just thought all of that was my personality, that's who I was, looking back, I think my body was just in such a like severe fight or flight. And when, for anyone who has been brought up by someone, whether that's like a parent or a caregiver or like a step parent in my case, that is so like angry or like scary in a way, you can't fight that out because you can't scream at them, especially if you're taught like, you know, this is, you respect your elders and this is what you do. You can't fight that out. So my body naturally just went into flight, which was me just avoiding everything possible. And yeah, I think sometimes people don't realize that procrastination has such a direct link with anxiety. So yeah, I think from as far back as I can remember, I was just an anxious person, and that's what I almost just identified as. I just thought I was a bit, not shy, but just a bit like, a bit more, yeah, like in the background type thing, unless I was around people who I was very, very comfortable with and felt very safe with.
I'm sorry that you went through that. That sounds really difficult. And with the people that you work with, is that something that you see often, that their anxiety is developed through childhood, or do you work with people who've developed anxiety later on in life, or is it just a mix?
Probably 95% of girls I work with, and I think just in general, people who have met in the past, it's come from a direct link from childhood. When I kind of started out my anxiety healing journey for myself, it wasn't until I did something called inner child healing that really, really helped me. So I bring that a lot into like the Monday night sessions, or if I'm coaching a private client, because I think sometimes we try and heal anxiety at surface level and we try and tell ourselves to not worry, and we might take a few deep breaths or, you know, whatever it might be. But sometimes we forget that there is an original, like there's a root wound somewhere, whether that was from one specific event from being younger, and it might not be like childhood, might be a bit older, maybe like early 20s or just something in the past. But usually I do find that a lot of people, when you start diving into, okay, well, what specifically triggers your anxiety? Okay, what happened in your childhood? What's the earliest you remember feeling like that? Usually there's a direct link between a relationship with a caregiver or something like that that's then developed into them being in long-term survival.
Really interesting. So you spoke about inner child work. Can you tell me a bit more about what that is?
Yeah, so it's almost like reparenting. So it can come in different ways. Inner child healing can either literally just be doing things you love as a child. So a lot of people find that when they start doing crafts, or if they've got kids and they end up going to soft play or to the park or whatever, and they're like, oh, why do I feel so good during this time? And sometimes it can literally just be activating that, yeah, like inner child inside of you, and just allowing that one to be free, especially if there's been a case where someone's had to become the parent young. That can be through many different reasons. Sometimes when I say that, people think that, you know, if one of their parents struggled with addiction or whatever, so the child then had to kind of become the parent. But sometimes it can be the sense that, so in my case, the situation was that I had an emotionally abusive step parent. And logically looking back on it now, my mum had to make sure he was the priority constantly. And a counsellor kind of described that to me, that I was then like, I'm not important enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not loved enough because I'm second best to that person. And I think mother-daughter relationships are really complex, because if sometimes I like to think of anxiety that it literally was created as a really good thing to keep us alive. And because of that, way back when, we needed to have relationships with our mums. Like we are naturally we literally get that oxytocin release when we are around them. So sometimes when there's a wall between that, it can really, really trigger like a survival mode in us. Yeah, so in that sense, because she was so busy with them, I then had to become a parent quite quick and almost be like, why are you not seeing this? Why are you not seeing this? Like, why are you not doing anything about that? Because his behaviour isn't okay. So you usually find that people who have trauma actually are very, very mature because of that. So you're almost going back and allowing yourself to be a kid. And then the other side, what I really like doing and what I find the most emotional with clients when I'm working with them is deep visualizations. So you literally take them to meet their inner child. And I know it sounds a bit woo-woo and a bit like fluffy, but it's really, really powerful. And that's usually where like girls will come out of the visualizations and they will just bawl their eyes out, because something that has been stored for a very long time is finally getting acknowledged and met. So there's many different ways of doing like inner child work and inner child healing, but that was probably one of the first things I did that I was like, oh, this is working. Like I'm going back to that root and that like the original wound that made me and like created that kind of fight or flight response.
I have a couple of different questions on this.
Okay.
So, do you feel comfortable speaking about your family situation, family dynamic? Is this person still in your life anymore?
Luckily, no.
Okay.
Luckily, my mum finally was like, yeah, okay, this this isn't okay. So they like ended things when I was about 18. Yeah.
And how has this affected your relationship with your mum?
It's been on and off. We've, resolved things, and then I've kind of, something's triggered me, and, that's things I've had to work on along the way. And even now, like, some things will trigger me, but I think I'm more equipped to understand it and like feel those emotions and deal with them. But it's been difficult, and there's been difficult conversations that have had to happen, and I think she's a bit more understanding of it now. But there's definitely still triggers there that bring up a lot of emotion for me. But yeah, it did take a while for things to be okay.
I can imagine it's not something that just happens overnight, isn't it? And you've
Yeah.
obviously done a lot of work on it yourself. And through doing this work, is that kind of how you realised where your anxiety developed, or did you kind of always have a sense of where it was coming from?
I think it's a weird one, because I think at first I just didn't think anxiety was a thing. It just, I don't know if it was just at that time, or whether it's because, I sometimes do work in schools with kids, so I think schools are getting better at teaching kids about mental health. So I think it was probably just a lack of knowledge at that point. And it wasn't until I think I was doing my A levels, and I remember these counsellors coming in to do talks with us, and they were like, "Oh yeah, so here's the symptoms of anxiety and depression, and this is what you should look for." And I can literally remember myself sat in the chair watching it in like an assembly, and I was like,
That's me.
"Oh my God." And it was almost like a pure relief of like, this isn't my personality. This is just almost like an illness that can go. But then at the same time, I was like, oh, oh no, it's like an illness or something that I've got. So it was a weird feeling. So I think, yeah, I didn't know it was anxiety until that point. And then when I went to see a counsellor for the first time, and she was like, yeah, so I think you're showing signs of like quite bad anxiety, sometimes dipping into like a depressive mode. So if you're thinking about it in terms of like nervous system, it's like flicking between that like fight or flight and freeze. And I remember coming out of that session and saying to my mum in the car, he's made me feel this way. So I think it was like an instant, and I just knew that because then it wasn't my personality, it was something that was, yeah, like an illness or something. I was then able to put reason to it, but I didn't know the specifics. I just knew that he made me feel awful whenever I was at home, and I knew there was a lot of anger underneath. But it wasn't until I did more like deeper work that I actually made connections to specific triggers. So if something triggers me like in adulthood, most times I can relate it back to something relating to like him, or like his relationship with him and my mum type thing. So I think it took a while to learn those like direct links and those exact wounds. But I think initially, yeah, it was just like, yeah, it's him.
It's so funny as well that you mentioned that, because I think I had quite a similar experience. I was going through a bit of a depressive period, and I remember speaking to a doctor, and I was like, so I don't think I'm depressed, but I've got this, this, and this, and this is how I'm feeling. And then at the end, I was like, so what do you think's wrong with me? And she's like, yeah, you're depressed. And you know,
Like, yeah, that sound.
yeah. And I was like, all right, okay. But it's just funny because I don't know, sometimes you're just like in denial about it, aren't you? And then you're like, oh no, that like, you're just like, oh, I can't be depressed, or I can't be anxious. And then someone else tells you, like a medical professional, like someone who knows, and then you're like, oh, okay.
Sure?
But it's just when you were like, oh, at first I didn't even know if anxiety was a thing, because I always thought like, okay, I know some people struggle with depression or struggle with anxiety, but I've never experienced that. And so you think, I don't know, everything that you're feeling is so removed from that because
Yeah.
you never know, do you? Till someone's like, no, that sounds exactly like that other
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. And then when they tell you, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, I think so, especially when you're young as well. Some people genuinely just think, like myself included, that that's your personality. That's just who you are, and this is never going to change. This is just always going to be a thing. But I also think sometimes when we label ourselves with something, that's not. Sometimes that can make it worse as well, and there's a lot of overthinking that comes with that. And sometimes I think it's actually nicer to just go, okay, there's something that feels unsafe at the minute. So my nervous system has gone, right, let's protect you from that so you don't get hurt again. And then it's either gone into it's fight or flight to escape that thing, which is your anxiety, or into shutdown, which is like your freeze, sort of like your depression. And so I think sometimes it's better to just go, okay, at this moment, my body's trying to protect me from something, so it's just shut me down for a bit. So rather than actually labeling yourself with something, like, we're not labels, when we're just people going through really tough shit.
Yeah.
And our body's trying to protect us one way or the other.
No, I hear you. For example, it's funny because I feel like I struggle with bouts of like anxiety or depression, and it might be triggered by, like a certain thing. And I can always kind of link it back to what it's been triggered by. But then on the whole, I know that I'm not usually like that. And then when I am in those moments, I kind of feel like, oh, will I ever feel normal again, or like myself again? And I always do, but at the time, I'm like, oh my god, I'll never feel
Yeah.
like myself. Yeah,
It feels like all consuming,
yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
it? And I think that's why awareness is so important and education is so important. I think there is a fine line though. Like when girls have like come to the sessions or I've worked with clients and we've developed that awareness of what they're struggling with, what the triggers are, when it shows up, why it shows up. But the problem is, and this was exactly me in my early 20s, I found that education and those triggers and I was like, this is amazing because now I can separate myself from it. I can go, okay, feeling this way at the moment, but it's just because of that. So I just need to do X, Y, Z and I'll feel better. But the only problem is, and like I said, this was me in my early 20s, that you then start to spiral. You're then like obsessed with self-help books and self-help podcasts and researching like mental health, and you just go into this like education and learning just constant, and then that becomes overwhelming. That makes you overthink, and it just, I think that's where I had got myself to, that I learned everything.
yeah.
Like I knew everything about myself and my triggers and whatnot. So I do think with like the education side of it and the awareness, it's important, but then there's also like a fine line to try not to let it overwhelm you, try not to, let it consume you.
Yeah, yeah, and we're feeling beings, aren't we? We can't just have like a step-by-step process to recovery or step-by-step process to feeling better, because that would just never, we're not, I don't know, a telly that you would go and go take somewhere to fix, because there's a lot that goes into it. So yeah, I totally hear what you're saying.
And I think sometimes there's parts of your trauma and your responses to it that actually, I know I've just said like it's not who you are, the anxiety is not who you are, but sometimes those traits make you who you are. So if you have had to, become the parent at a young age, and yes, that's caused some like struggles in your adulthood, but actually that's maybe made you more of a carer for your friends. That's maybe made you more of someone who, like, someone comes to you to get advice from. So I think sometimes it's not about like getting rid of all the trauma or getting rid of everything that it made you become, because sometimes there's beauty in that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you can maybe connect to people in a way that you wouldn't have been able to before, and help people because you've been through that kind of
Yeah.
situation yourself. And yeah, it makes you see the world in a different light, doesn't it?
100%. Yeah, I think sometimes it can make you more grateful in the end as well, that you can see, like, looking back now, and it seems so weird, I will literally say to people that I'm so glad that happened, because it made me so much more like open-minded. It made me connect with more people. Yeah, so I think sometimes there's beauty in it.
So I know you mentioned that you tried a lot of different things, books, therapy, counselling. And what do you think wasn't working for you at the time?
I think I just didn't realise almost like what anxiety was in itself. I had gone to talk therapy, read what felt like every self-help book under the sun, listened to all your like Mel Robbins and Jay Shetty podcasts, and I felt like I was at a point where I knew everything about myself. I had learned a lot about what anxiety was, and it just wasn't. I couldn't understand why I still felt the same. Like I was aware, and that was helpful, but at the same time I was still having these like physical sensations and getting really nervous about stuff, on edge constantly, like walking into a lecture theatre at uni, like if you were the last one in, or standing at a bus stop like wondering why your bus is running late, and oh my god, I'm going to be late for uni, and just like simple things. And it wasn't until I went through a bad breakup when I was about 25. I just thought, I need to do something more, because I'm feeling the lowest I've felt in a while, most anxious I've felt in a while. All those like, I'm not good enough, I'm not wanted, I'm not loved, like wounds and triggers were like popping up left, right, and centre. And I'd always loved doing yoga. So someone said to me, why don't you do your like yoga like course? And I was like, do you know what? Why not? And when I was doing that, they were talking about like the body and regulation, and I was like, I've never really heard of nervous system regulation before. And I did like a bit of a deep dive and studied around it, and I was like, it all makes sense. Because so when you're dysregulated, it means like you're in your fight or flight or your freeze. When you're regulated, you're at that baseline, and you might tap in and out of those survival modes, but only when it's needed, like what it was actually created for. Like if someone's chasing you, or as like a girl on your own walking through somewhere dark.
That's
like,
when you need it, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So you might, okay, I need to go into my fight or flight, or I freeze if something feels really heavy. But you want to, like, if you are in your fight or flight, or your freeze or fawn, which is the other one, which is a lot of like people pleasing and stuff, which I was horrendous for. You want to regulate to bring yourself back in. And I'd never heard of it before. And regulation work is mainly all physical. And it makes total sense, because every single anxiety symptom, apart from overthinking, is physical.
It's physical, yeah.
So why do we all think that books and knowledge and stuff is going to be that game changer? And then when I started learning about like somatic work, like breath work, working with like your senses and stuff, because when you think of like your five senses, that is how you learn if your environment is safe. So can you see anything that's a danger? Can you, if like you hear a really loud noise and you're like can you smell anything, taste anything that is dangerous? So it makes total sense, and it's so simple that like working with your senses, you let your body know that it's safe, if that makes any sense. So then I just started working a lot on like body-based stuff, somatic work, throwing myself into yoga, and yeah, just doing that. And at the same time, that was when I discovered inner child healing, started doing that. And for the first time in probably ever, I actually felt a shift and
Wow.
started to regulate. And I think that's something that people miss, is that they've read the books and done the like self-help mindset work without actually just regulating first and using the physical body to do that.
It's really interesting because I was having this conversation with my sister over the weekend, funnily enough, because we were talking about yoga and she was saying that even though she's been doing yoga for a while, she still finds it really hard to not let her mind wander. So I've also been doing yoga for a really long time, but since I started going to the studio that I'm at now, there wasn't as much of a focus on breathing, whereas with the studio that I'm at now, in every single class, it's like that is such a big focus. And they've taught us about how to breathe and to like soothe the parasympathetic nervous system and like exactly what that looks like. And it's like such a simple thing. And it's so different to your normal breathing, because I'd always think in previous yoga classes they'd be like, make sure you're breathing, but they don't like tell you how to breathe. Whereas like at this class they've taught me how to breathe, and because it's so different to your normal breath, you're really actually thinking about that, and you're thinking about that so much, and you're thinking about the moves that you're doing and like how to move into the next posture, etc., that there's literally no room for your mind to wander, because you are so in that moment and you're really thinking about your practice. And I just end every class just feeling so tired, because I'm just like, wow, I've really like been super present and super in the practice. And yeah, it just feels amazing. So it's funny, isn't it, how you can do the same thing a million times and then like the millionth and one first time, you know what I mean? That next time is just going to be so different to every other time.
Yeah, I think breathwork and yoga are two of my like just ultimate, like if I can feel myself going into a bit of like if I'm feeling a bit triggered, if I book onto a yoga class, I think everyone's different with yoga. Some people want that really slow, really restorative, like quiet with certain aromas and certain music. But for some people, that can make their mind just spin. If that is, like, if someone's listening and they're like, yeah, that's me, I hate yoga, like, my mind just wanders, I would always say, like, try
A
what.
fast-paced class.
Yeah, well, maybe not even fast paced, but what I teach mainly is vinyasa, which is where you're moving into poses, following the breath. Everything's on an inhale or an exhale. And I've always taught it with, you don't have to be perfect. I'm not going to be at the front of the class doing headstands, so I'm not going to expect anyone else to be doing them. For me, yoga is more a regulation tool. To help you like get out of your fight or flight or freeze or whatever it may be. But I totally get what you mean, because that's what I loved about vinyasa, is you've got to focus on your breath. And I'll always sound like a broken record when I'm teaching a class, but I will constantly say, focus on your breath, follow your breath, not my time, and make sure you're doing your slow inhale, your slow exhale, rather than like my guidance. And you're totally right that it's because you have to focus on your breath. And I think it's because sometimes I'll say to people, like, in the moment, if you feel anxious or before you're going into something that feels quite triggering, do breath work. So either like even as simple as like your box breathing, or my favorite is like the 4-7-8. So you inhale for 4, you hold for 7 at the top, and then you exhale for 8. Or like the double inhale, slow exhale. Even just doing that will make such a difference. And everyone's like, why would that make that much difference? And it's like, well, what's the first thing that, well, not the first thing, but what is something prominent that happens when you're anxious? Your
Yeah.
heart rate beats, you're breathing really fast, and the more that happens, your body's like, okay, we're not safe. We're not
Yeah,
safe. We need to
yeah.
be anxious. We need to keep that feeling going. Whereas if you're like, okay, slow breaths, let's get that breath right back down, then your body starts to go, okay, we must be feeling a bit safer now. So it's like the most simple thing, and people just think it's not going to work. But the more you do it, the more you do it when you're triggered, it just makes such a big difference.
I completely agree. I just think it's something that's so slept on is
Yeah,
breath work and
massively.
yoga. And yeah, I think that's it, because the classes that I go to, it's always like on your next breath in or on your next breath
Yeah,
out, move into this posture. Like you said, it's not based on their timings. They're
yeah,
not like, okay, now do a downward dog, because it's
yeah.
like you do a downward dog in your time and your pacing. I'd been to so many yoga classes, but no one had ever taught me about ujjayi breath and like, how different that is and like the sound that it
Yeah,
makes. And then because that's so different to your normal breathing, it's not something that you can just do without
yeah,
thinking, because you've got to
yeah,
think about how you're doing it, don't you? So yeah, it's so interesting.
yeah, 100%. And I think that's what people miss about yoga as well. That the amount of people I'm like, oh, you should try yoga. Everyone says the same thing. Nah, or I'd be awful at yoga. I'm not flexible. And what people miss so much is that yoga isn't really a physical like exercise practice. Yes, it has all these benefits to the physical body and it's incredible, but it was created as like a regulated, like balancing thing. It's a mental health tool. So you can't be bad at yoga. I've said in classes before, like, if you need to sit in the back corner in child's pose and just focusing on your breath, you're great at yoga. You don't have to be doing splits and handstands and folding yourself like a pretzel. It's just such a good tool to bring you back down to earth.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? Because there's such a misconception. And again, this is everything that I've learnt from my teachers. But they were saying that there's 8 limbs of yoga, and 7 of them aren't even moving. Like
Yeah.
there's only one of them where you're actually doing like
Yeah.
the movement practice. And yeah, it's really interesting because it makes you realize how distant we've become from actual yoga
Yeah.
philosophy and what it's rooted in, and just the, I don't know, the capitalization of yoga and now what it's become, when actually when you look at the teachings, it's just so different, isn't it?
So different. And I wish people realize that, because people get so overwhelmed with yoga because they think, right, I need to be in my matching Lululemon set and I need to
Yeah,
do it before a fancy brunch and
it's just not that at
I
all.
need to
Yeah.
be 7 stone and, I need to be amazing at it before I go into it. And really, I think people miss that yoga you can do on your carpet in your pajamas and just, it doesn't have to be like this perfect thing. In fact, the more imperfect it is actually the better yoga it is. Like, I had back pain the other day and I thought, "Do you know what, I'm just going to do some yoga poses in whatever I was wearing on the carpet." Felt so much better afterwards, not just
Yeah.
in terms of my back, but just I'd taken a minute in the middle of the day to just, I think I literally just did some like cat cows, thread the needles, like just nothing even. I usually say to people when I teach classes that I'll usually have a moment where I'll go, just take a few minutes and I want you to imagine that I'm not here. You are on a mat on your own in your living room. There's no YouTube video on or anything, but you are just listening to your body and giving it what it wants, as long as you're not in a position that's like injuring yourself. Because sometimes we might even find ourselves in a pose that isn't a yoga pose, but it's just our body has gone, that's what feels right, because we don't give our bodies what we're so not present with what our bodies need.
Yeah.
Like, our bodies need a rest, and yet we're stressed 24/7. We're not listening into to like what it needs.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I could go on an unpopular rant about this because I've been thinking about it a lot recently. And you know what? If anyone's got to this part of the video, number one, congratulations. Number two, you might not like me afterwards. But I just, I don't think I will ever get a Garmin, an Aura, an Apple Watch, or anything like that, because that to me is the true capitalization of understanding your own body and what it needs, like tracking every step, tracking your sleep. Because what if you wake up in the morning and you actually feel quite well rested, but then your ring's like beeping at you, telling you that you've had a bad sleep? Or I think we've just come so far from what it used to be like, where we would actually take a minute and listen to our body without the use of technology. Whereas like when we're using technology to understand our body, I feel like we're really removing ourselves from that. And don't get me wrong, I do think that, like, I don't know, if you're running a marathon or like a race, or like, I get it.
Yeah, if you've got something to like
work towards. But like every day, is it something that I think we need to be looking at our phones to tell us how we feel? No?
Yeah. No, I do agree. And I think you've even just got to look at the structure of, like 3 meals a day. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a nutritionist and I know everything about food, but I think sometimes, especially if you work like a 9 to 5, you're not eating at 12 because you're hungry. Maybe you've got hungry again at 10 a.m. or maybe you won't be hungry until 3 p.m. But you've not listened to your body. You've gone, okay, it's lunchtime, I'm going to eat. Or sometimes you might wake up and just be like, actually, I'm not feeling that hungry, but I've got to eat before work or whatever. And who's to say that we need 3 meals a day? Or was that created because we had to fit it around
our work schedule? Well, it was that, wasn't it?
And so I think that's another reason that our bodies learn to not trust us to give it what it needs.
So it's really great to hear that body-based exercises worked for you and also nervous system regulation. So what was it that felt so different to the work that you were doing before?
I think it just felt calming. That when I was doing all this reading and all of that, like what I would almost lean towards is like mindset work. Even journaling, I mean, I will recommend journaling to anyone. I think it's incredible, whether it's prompted, whether it's not, and you're just getting everything out. But again, it's not like a regulation tool for your body. It's more mindset in a way. But it feels overwhelming. All of that can feel too much. It can feel like work. Like you can just feel like, I've got to read this book, I've got to listen to this podcast. Okay, they're telling me all this information. I should probably write notes down and then do what they're saying. And your brain just goes, you can't keep up with it. And then
is it almost making you feel more anxious because you're like, I've got all of this to do? Yeah.
One of my Monday night sessions the other day, I literally advised someone to stop doing their like mindset work for a week because she was doing a lot of mindset work, a lot of self-analysis. And I was like, just stop. Just slow. The next week, I don't want you to do I don't want you to read a self-help book. I don't want you to listen to any podcasts, and I don't want you to analyse yourself anymore or do deep dive into your triggers. It's like, you've got enough awareness for now. Just take some time to settle because your brain just needs to breathe a minute. And I think when I started doing like physical work and working with the senses, still sticking with yoga, but it's not the only thing I do. But like if I'm in a yoga class and towards the end, if people have done yoga, they'll know the term Shavasana, but if you've never heard of Shavasana, it's basically a little nap at the end of a class.
It's my favourite part.
Honestly, I'm like, can it just go on for like 45 minutes?
Yeah.
But if I'm in a yoga studio that's gone dark at the end, it's a bit heated, they usually give you like a blanket, sometimes different props to make you more comfortable. There's different like scents and stuff. Sometimes they come round and literally just like give you a massage or like push your shoulders down. That for me is like I come out of a yoga class feeling so regulated because they've accessed every single sense, and that's what I try and bring into like the Monday night sessions as well. If we do end up doing yoga where the lights are dim, I've got like a neon de-stress scent on in the room. I literally tell them to wear their pajamas, come in blankets and fluffy socks, because you feel way more calmer than if you are constantly overwhelming yourself with mindset work. I think there's a place for each, but it's got to be balanced. You've got to let your body like just sink into it a bit and relax.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally know that feeling, and it is just the best, isn't it? Because I just think, oh, I never feel as relaxed and nice as I do when I'm in Shavasana, because I feel like my brain is just like so calm, but also just tingly, just because I'm just happy because I've like finished my yoga practice and my mind feels so stress free that I feel like my neurons just have so much space to fire,
Yeah, literally. And for some people, like you were saying about your sister, it can be really overwhelming at first. I think people forget that things like meditation and stuff can take time to like learn how to like if a thought comes in, okay, just let it pass, let it pass. Some people do have to learn to do that. But I would also say that if you've tried meditating or you've tried like a slow yoga or a shavasana and you're like, this is just horrible, I hate this, there's other regulation tools that will work for you. And I would advise anyone to have a look for their regulation toolkit is what I name it as, because for me, like anything like that is amazing. Just some quiet peace that regulates me, but for some people that can be really triggering depending on their own wounds and their own triggers and where they are in their like with their nervous system. So having a look into different regulation techniques, because like singing, dancing and jumping is also regulation techniques. So I think if people are listening and thinking, oh, they're on about that these tools are really good, but I've tried them and I don't like them, there is other regulation tools.
That's good to know, isn't it? Because I can imagine it feels hard when you've tried something and you just don't feel like it works for you. I think sometimes it's finding the right teachers, isn't it? Because like I was saying, yoga to me is so different now than it was for, I don't know, probably about 10 years.
Yeah.
Like I feel like only in the last 2 years have I truly discovered what yoga can be. It's so easy, isn't it, to think, oh, that just doesn't work for me. Whereas sometimes trying the same thing but with different teachers can really help, because you could never know till you find the right person that it sticks with.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think I've been to yoga classes before that I've not personally connected with. I'm sure other people have come to my classes and thought, not for me, which is absolutely fine. And I think people go to one yoga class and think, no, I tried yoga once, hated it.
Yeah.
It's like there are so many different types of yoga to begin with. There's fast, slow, ones that are more physical, ones that literally make your body feel like it's broken for a week, some that make you come out feel really relaxed. And then even within those different like disciplines, so to speak, or those different types, so many different types of yoga teachers. Some might be really warm and huggy, like I will hug everyone that comes into a class, and some people might be like, she's too much, she's too like, that's not for me, like I prefer a bit more distance. So I think finding like the personality and the like the energy of a yoga instructor that works for you as well is important. So yeah, I think just trying different ones works too.
So what inspired you to start the Anxiety Healing Club, and how has that evolved into something more than you had imagined?
Well, when I moved to Stockport, I thought I want to teach yoga as I had been doing, but there's just so much competition around here, and I was like, it's a lot to build up when there are so many yoga instructors around. I was doing anxiety coaching at the same time, and I thought, why don't I try and find a way to mix them together? So maybe doing like a yoga class that's specifically for anxious people, like the whole approach is to regulate your nervous system during that time. And then as I started like doing more like brainstorming with myself, I was like, maybe I could make it into like a little bit of a club. Not like a club, but girls come, we do a bit of yoga, then I'll take them through visualizations or meditations or regulation techniques, and then I will open up the floor for people to either share their stories, get advice, I can coach them. And I started that and I was like, oh, this is quite nice actually. I feel like people are getting a lot out of it. I was having lovely messages, and I kept it quite structured to begin with. So it was, yeah, literally probably the same thing every week. Bit of yoga, meditation or visualization, bit of journaling, then anxiety coaching. I would almost like work with the girls one-to-one for like 5-10 minutes each. It has become just so much more than I thought it would. It's still building, so it's still small, but it is now, I wouldn't even say there's a structure to it. Sometimes we do yoga, sometimes we don't even touch any yoga, and it just completely depends on what the girls want that day. And I think the beauty of it is it's just become this like safe space of like-minded girls. I think in Stockport a lot of people are moving here for work or boyfriends like we have, and not knowing anyone, or they know people but they work from home so they don't see anyone. And I think there's a big thing in Stockport at the minute of people wanting more connection, and I think that's one thing, but it's another thing to find like-minded people who will listen to your trauma on a weekly basis. And because maybe like we have acquaintances but we don't have friends who we can really be like, actually I'm feeling really triggered at the minute, I've gone through X, Y and Z and I'm just not feeling good, or that kind of thing. It's evolved into something really lovely where it's like it's totally led by the girls. Like some weeks they'll come in and most of them will just be like, can we just do some yoga and a little bit of a meditation and just fully chill out. And then some days like one girl will walk in and just burst into tears on the spot, and then she'll tell her story, and then someone else might be going through something similar, so they'll start sharing. And the whole session will be them just venting, crying, getting advice from me and getting advice from the other girls as well. I've been so lucky that the girls who come are just the best and so non-judgmental. I mean, I wouldn't let people in who were judgy or horrible, but they're amazing. Sometimes I'll give advice, but then someone else will jump in and will give them advice, or and I think it's just lovely that that's an option. And one thing that I really struggled with when I was younger and I was anxious was that everyone around me seemed fine and happy and confident, and I couldn't understand why I wasn't like that. So having a space where girls can come and just say, actually, I'm really, really struggling. And sometimes, we just laugh. We are just there having a great time, and we will all just laugh about the fact that we think our boyfriends hate us because they've not said I love you 10 times in the past hour. Just like silly stuff that sometimes you do just want to laugh at. Like, why are we like this? This is hilarious. So it's now become this, almost like this group of girls who are healing and trying their hardest each week to just keep going. And like I had a message the other day of someone saying that they've just booked to go to London to a concert on their own, and she was like, I never would have done this before, and like thanks to the techniques that you've taught, I've just done it. And it's like moments like that I'm like, oh, like this is why I created it. And also like seeing the girls make friends, they make friends with each other and go and do things outside of the sessions, which I just think is beautiful. So it's turned from this yoga focused on anxiety to just this safe space of just great girls.
I love that you've created this community, and also that they feel so comfortable with you to tell you what they need in those days, because that really shows how much you've built that up and how
Yeah.
safe they do feel in that space. And really interesting what you said actually about communities, because usually when you go to a community-led event, it's quite a lot to be there. Like, you've really got to put yourself out there, don't you? Because if you're going on your own to make new friends, that can feel like a lot. Or even if, like, I run a community event, for example, where it's an open mic night and anyone can get up on stage and talk about anything really. But again, that is quite a lot to put yourself in that situation. And especially when you're struggling with something like anxiety, I can imagine it's really hard to, when you feel like you want to create those connections, but you don't feel like any of these spaces are for you.
Yeah.
And then to find a space, I can imagine that's just really nice.
And don't get me wrong, I think girls come in the first time, they're like, yeah, well, I've just been a bit anxious, so I kind of just wanted, to come here and da-da-da, but that's pretty much it. And then by the third week, they're like, so when I was younger, and
Yeah.
and it just splurts out. But I think that's lovely because you can see that they've just been holding it in. And when you are someone who's experienced some sort of trauma or childhood stuff, sometimes you either you might feel like a burden, like you don't want to share because, you're putting other people out, or you don't want to be judged or that kind of stuff. So for the girls to actually create such a, because it's not just me, it's the girls who are in there as well, create such a nice safe space that people feel like they can just blurt everything out, when sometimes they might have been holding that in for months, years. So yeah, it's nice to see when that happens.
If someone's listening to this and they feel stuck in anxiety right now, what would be your one piece of advice to them?
It's not you, it's not your personality, it is just your nervous system protecting you. And I would 100% recommend creating your regulation toolkit, whatever that means for you. Just doing a bit of research on different nervous system regulation tools, things that activate your parasympathetic nervous system, and trying different things. If breath work doesn't work for you, try jumping around your living room in the morning. I think for me that would be the biggest thing that I wish I had learned in the beginning.
I love that you started with that as well, because when you're in that moment, you do just feel like it is all encompassing and forever. Yeah. So yeah, just knowing that other people have gone through that and have come out the other side, I can imagine that's really powerful.
Yeah, I think just keeping in mind that it isn't forever, as long as, you're focused on that healing journey. Like, sometimes I've done talks and I've just been like, sometimes you have to, not in like a big-headed way, but sometimes you have to take a moment to go, if 18-year-old me could see me doing a talk, she'd be absolutely like, she just never would have thought that would be possible. And I think if you are someone who's even on your healing journey, take a moment to just go, actually, like, I got on a bus this morning not worrying about if I was going to trip down the aisle. Like, just little things that, like, just take a moment to look back and think, actually, I've come a long way.
Yeah.
Because we can forget to do that sometimes.
Yeah, it's so easy to just think, oh, we've never worried about this or worried about that. But actually, when you take yourself back into that space, you're actually like, whoa, what I've learned is so insane. And I've just come so much further than I ever thought I could. Right, shall we do rapid fire question round?
Yeah, put me on the spot with questions.
Morning person or night owl?
Night owl.
Are you?
100%. Yeah. Hence why we're doing this at midday, because I'm not a 6 a.m. wake.
I am, but I was like, I also love this timing for us.
Yeah.
Because even when you text me to say that you're late, I was like, yes, I love that. Like, I love that I've just got an extra half an hour. Because even though I'm a morning person, I wouldn't say I'm like I don't know, on time or like on
Yeah,
track
yeah,
for everything.
yeah.
I think I'm just a morning person, but take a long time to
Yeah.
do things.
Oh no, I am, yeah, total night owl.
Yeah.
Total. Always have been.
One thing that instantly calms you down.
Breath work. Yeah.
Yeah, good point. What's your favourite one?
4-7-8.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to try it because
Yeah.
I've never tried that one.
Yeah. The tip is to always make your exhale longer than your inhale. Like, so, yeah.
Okay. I feel like that happens naturally for me because
Yeah.
I feel like I can't really. This is going to sound weird, but I just don't feel like I can breathe in loads, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like with my exhale, I'm like, I feel like I can do that for ages. Yeah. Yeah. What does your ideal Sunday look like?
Ooh. I think either just sat in front of the TV doing absolutely nothing.
Nice.
But I do love like a good walk in nature with a little trip to a nice little country pub at the end.
Lovely.
Yeah.
What are you watching on telly at the minute?
Do you know what? I've started that The Good Doctor.
Oh,
Have you seen
No,
it?
is it good? Yeah.
It is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's like an autistic doctor. So social skills
Yeah.
he struggles with, but incredibly smart. So I've been watching that as just like my easy watch.
Okay, I could get into that.
Yeah.
I've been watching Love Story, but I'm done with, like, as in it's finished now.
Yeah.
So I need to find something else.
new.
Yeah, so thank you. A small thing that brings you joy.
Hearing the birds.
Yeah.
Like when it's sunny and you can hear the birds.
Yeah.
That.
I've really noticed that this week. Just waking up and I can hear the birds tweeting and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, spring has sprung.
Yeah. Like if I'm having like my morning cup of tea and the back door's open and the sun's out and the birds are singing, that's a moment where I'm like, let's do some gratitude and like appreciate this.
You know what? I don't know why, but I couldn't tell where your accent was from until you said, with my morning cup of tea. And then I was like, that is the most Yorkshire thing I've heard you say.
Do you know what? My accent is like
A medley.
here, there, and everywhere because I feel like I've been brought up in 2 different places and then like moved somewhere else. My accent is just, it's just a generic like northern twang.
I love that. Everyone says that I've got a very neutral accent. And I think same because I've just been everywhere.
Yeah, here, there, everywhere.
That you can't ever place where I'm from.
Yeah.
What's your love language in friendships?
In friendships, I think I'm always just a words of affirmation person.
Oh.
Always, yeah. Yeah.
I don't know many words of affirmation people. That's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, no, big time. And then in relationships, it's the same, but physical touch as well. Yeah. Yeah, like if a friend was to send me like a paragraph, just being like, you know, you bring so much to my life or whatever. Like when the girls from the sessions message me like, sessions have made such a difference, I'm like, this is amazing.
You know what? That is so true because I don't think I'd ever seen it through a friendship lens before either. But when I do think about getting those messages, I just feel like they make me so emotional.
Yeah,
and
literally.
and I think this is exactly why I'd do anything, you know, just to know that I've like impacted your life in a small way.
100%.
Hot girl walk or horizontal in bed?
Bit of both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say it's kind of like the previous question where, yeah.
Somewhere in the middle.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
I had a really nice time.
Yeah, me too.